I want to make a video on coping and how we cope with our problems, and how usually in many circumstances coping with our problems usually requires something that creates problems, an indulgence of some kind, a vice, and how we're trying to find ways, sort of like existence. It describes existence very well. You reproduce because you happen to reproduce, and then you reproduce again because you happen to exist because someone else had a problem and they decided to reproduce their ignorance, and that was the problem. Whatever problem it may be, what kind of ever deprivation, whatever satisfaction that leads to some kind of cycle like reproduction and leading to another thing existing, another being existing, and leading them to have to deal with something that causes them to have to reproduce, and it's just a cycle that continues on, and there's nothing we can do about it. I didn't ask to be here, but I'm here anyway because someone else decided to have let their horniness or let their lack of competence or lack of intelligence or ignorance get in the way, or their ego get in the way. Whatever problem they have to deal with, and those problems they have, those indulgences, usually come from some kind of problem or deprivation. An ego problem, comes from deprivation because you don't feel like you've accomplished enough, so therefore you have to have a kid. Therefore, you continue the cycle, the positive, the feedback loop of continuing the cycle over and over again, the redundant cycle happening over and over again, so that something else can happen again and again and again. And that's exactly what we're stuck in. We're stuck in a cycle. There's only good and there's only bad. Obviously, there's different gradations of these things, but there's good, bad, satisfied, unsatisfied, in pain, not in pain, and it's a matter of how much at that point. There's either I'm over here, I'm over here, feeling satisfaction, not satisfied, suffering, not suffering. There's only so many ways we can describe a situation. And in many cases, it's either I'm suffering or I'm not suffering. That's all that matters. And if you're suffering, that's obviously a bad thing. If you're not satisfied, you're complacent, you're content, and that's obviously another consideration, another bilateral way of looking at life, I suppose, and looking at there's only, usually speaking, there's either A or B in many circumstances. There's either I'm hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm satisfied, I'm not satisfied. Many times we have to satisfy these desires, and that requires an indulgence. And it requires some kind of vice, some kind of indulgence, and that indulgence, it defends the problems that we're trying to solve. Like um, sometimes you don't want to, you want to not eat, you want to lose weight, and to lose weight may cause some kind of stress in you, and that stress causes you to want to eat more because you can't eat more. So that the indulgence, you want to eat, and that causes you to gain weight, but you want to lose weight, and that only contributes to the problem that you wanted to lose weight. And now you want to lose weight, but that stresses you out, and then you can't eat. And since you have a problem, you usually cope with your problems by eating. Therefore, you have to eat again, and you just keep on satisfying an indulgence to make sure that your deprivation doesn't get out of control. And then you do that, and you satisfy the deprivation, and that feeds the problem that you were having to begin with. So you're trying to lose weight, but you want to eat, and you want to indulge yourself. I want to get a cheat meal in, or whatever it may be, to use an example. And then that only contributes to the problem. Now you feel like you've eaten too much, then things get out of control. You indulge yourself. It's all about um, in many cases, this example can be destroyed by way of moderation, moderately having something like that. But almost in a way, using it as an example, a good example would be, yes, you eat, then you look at yourself and you're not satisfied with the way you're looking. You To cope with your existence, you indulge because it's so stressful. And then the stress that you try to deal with and indulging, then you indulge that satisfaction. Okay, I'm trying to lose weight, but I can't stand it, and it's too stressful for me. I'm thinking about something that's stressing me out, and then now I need to eat. So even if you're not eating when you're hungry, it's satisfying some deprivation that you feel of some kind of stress. Sometimes it can just be boredom that can cause some kind of desire for hunger to satisfy a need. It doesn't always have to be hunger that's causing, say, satisfaction to fill your stomach, to satisfy some kind of hunger you have. It doesn't always have to be hunger. It can just be I'm bored, therefore my body needs to do something. In many cases, it's those primal instincts that take over. And your primal instincts are telling you to eat, and there's nothing else. Eating is always fun if you're not completely full and um, find food repugnant, so you're going to eat something, and that's easy and it's a nice satisfying way, but then it defeats the problem that you had to begin with. So you eat, you feel fat, you want to lose weight, but you're losing weight, you're stressed out, it's stressing you out, something else is stressing you out, you want a distraction, you want something to make time go by, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're coping long enough to die, to reach our death sooner. We're coping long enough to make the next day reach, so we could get to the next day, and then we get to the next day and we're not satisfied, and then we're just trying to buy time to the next day, to the next day. And I think another good example, we're buying time. I can't wait till tomorrow. Okay, let me eat until tomorrow. Let me cope with my life till tomorrow. And by indulging in something that's going to cause problems, let me eat and then let it cope until tomorrow. Then tomorrow, and I can't wait for tomorrow, and I can't wait for tomorrow, and I can't wait for tomorrow. And you keep on going and going and going. Oh, I'm here now. I can't wait to go home. I'm at home. I can't wait to go to school or work. And then you do the same thing. I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm sick of this now. I'm sick of being complacent. I want to move on to something else. So I think another good example of this would be something like video games is a good example in describing the situation. Um, in video games, you get strong enough and to get some kind of weapon, then you use that weapon to make the enemies easier or harder in the game, or whatever it may be. You use that weapon, you get stronger, you upgrade, and then you upgrade so that you can get stronger, and then so you can get stronger, and I can't wait for the next weapon. I can't wait for the next thing, and this is the same thing with life. It shows in things like video games because that's the very premise of something like that is about getting stronger and upgrading and getting better, and that's the very premise, and that's the very way of describing that's the description of something like a game or a video game is getting better and upgrading, especially video games. You're upgrading your character, and then you decide to get a better weapon. Then you can't wait for you get that weapon. Then you can't wait to get the better weapon. Then you can't wait to get the better weapon. And at the same time, the enemies you're fighting are getting harder and harder. And then if the enemies aren't getting harder, say you get stronger and stronger, and you're leveling up and leveling up, but the enemies aren't getting any easier, then what's the point in leveling up to begin with? It should just rely on your skill at beating the game then, right? So otherwise, what's the point? And if they are getting easier, then what's the point? Where's the challenge going? Isn't the game all about challenge and not making the game easier? Um, so you're trying to make a game challenging. You're trying to give some kind of reward. You want the satisfaction of beating something, but not the satisfaction that you're not going to get the satisfaction from not getting some kind of from not fighting harder, something getting more difficult, or something staying difficult. So you're getting stronger and stronger, and then if the enemies aren't getting any easier, then why are you getting stronger and stronger? Just to make sure that you can fight the enemies on the same level you were to begin with, or on the same, if they're scaling to your level, or if you're fighting and fighting and fighting, and things are getting easier and easier. Isn't the end of the game supposed to be the hardest part of the game? So what's the point in having a game that gets easier by the end? And where does the challenge go in the satisfaction of gaining your victory finally? It goes away if it gets easier, and it gets easier to only a point. That's another thing, another point. You can only expect so much, and the only expectation you can have is, okay, finally, the only expectation I can have, and goes to not setting your expectations or going too far ahead of yourself in certain circumstances. You can only expect so much, and expecting the best outcome in a situation is only going to destroy whatever outcome may happen. You're getting towards something, it's not there yet. You think about the whole day ahead beforehand, and you expect you almost in a way hope or expect the best possible outcome, or what you find to be the best possible outcome, at least for you and your circumstances. And thinking about those circumstances, you decide it's almost like letting the perfect get in the way of the good, and sometimes you get ahead of yourself too much in and of itself. Thinking about something and thinking too far ahead, or thinking about something too far ahead, can obviously get in the way of and be distracting, and that can almost in a way cause a detriment to the process of making what you wanted to begin with, and getting in the way and preventing it from happening. So those things can get in the way. They can be distractions. And you can only have so much of an expectation. So say that, using the video game example, you're fighting someone, and once you've upgraded as high as you can, or any expectation you have in the end is, I expect I can kill all these enemies with a super duper cool attack from 100 feet away. Whatever expectation you have whatever built-in expectation you have. There's only one. The greatest expectation you can have, whatever it may be, even though you can't put your fingers on it, there's an expectation, and the expectation is, I'm going to kill this enemy or all these enemies with one hit. And that expectation's already been reached in your mind, so why even try to satisfy it in real life? Because you already know, and you're letting the real life get in the way. Oh, I have to do all this work just to get to that in the real life, and I can just imagine it. So why let that get in the way? Because you can just imagine the best possible outcome. You can already reach it in your mind, so what's the point? It almost discourages you from even trying to fight for something, or reach some kind of goal in real life, because you've already imagined it, and that's getting in the way of just going through the upgrades to finally get there. And you just think, why why even bother at that point? And many, not projecting on anyone, but generally speaking, that's the case. And even if you're not necessarily thinking that consciously, there's something going on where you have this expectation of something greater happening, at least as a fantasy, um, in describing the situations. Generally speaking, about reality and our expectations, because we always want the best for us and around, and generally speaking, for the people around us, and the best expectation for us and everyone else. Um, at least speaking from my perspective. Yeah, you can only do so much to set your expectations, and there's only one expectation, and the greatest expectation can get in the way of just smaller expectations, or the expectations you don't even have at all. The small steps it take to possibly get to that great expectation that you have, and that great expectation is the dead end that we constantly reach in certain circumstances, and how we reach it, and obviously is the journey, and obviously life is can obviously be sometimes described as the journey. The journey and the destination lead nowhere regardless, because a journey doesn't mean anything if the destination means nothing, because every little step of the way, every interaction we have is the destination that we're reaching, and the final destination that generally describes and gets misconstrued in this circumstance is death, and we're finally reaching death. Death is the thing that creates the meaning. Without death, what's the point in doing anything if it doesn't create the meaning by having death? Death is the thing that creates the meaning, but also the same thing that takes away any kind of, um, it takes away your awareness of that meaning. So you die, but that's the thing that gives it meaning. But that meaning is taken away by death because you're no longer aware of it. And you not knowing it doesn't mean, you can project into the future and say I want the best for these people, but if you're not there to experience it, your reaction at that point in time, beyond your projection into the future and your expectations, doesn't mean much of anything. It just means that you had an expectation, that's what happened, and that led to something else, and good, it happened a certain way, but you and your interaction, your experience that you project into the future as well, and your sort of like people saying, oh, they'd be proud of you if they were still alive. Well, they're not going to be proud of you because they're dead and they have no perception. And the perception that you're applying to them doesn't really mean much because it's just a simple interaction. And you never know necessarily what their perception would be to begin with. So it could be anything, and you don't know their expectation to begin with. And expectation is just a very rigid or very vague word to describe a certain circumstance of psychology and how people react to a certain situation. So it's really just a vague description, but that doesn't mean that there isn't anything, that there isn't something objectively that's happening, and that's exactly, there's these interactions that are objectively happening. Just our description of them is disconnected from the situation that we're describing. And something's happening a certain way regardless of what we perceive or we don't perceive. It's still red. That's this thing that we're seeing. It doesn't matter if you decide to call it something else or you're colorblind. It's red regardless. It doesn't matter if you, whatever you consider, it's still red. It doesn't matter how you interact with it. It's still red. It's still a certain color, and the description obviously is the thing that we get mixed up in these circumstances. Just because I may not be able to describe it, I may not sense it the same way as you, we can't necessarily come down to a conclusion, but there's a conclusion. It's red, and that's exactly the way it is, and my description doesn't mean anything in describing, as a matter of fact, exactly what's happening objectively outside, whatever color it may be. Whatever is there, regardless of my description. And my description is just an interaction that's happening as well, and that's objectively existing. And my words mean nothing because they're nothing more than an interaction, a noise, vibration created by these vibrations that are going out and interacting with the environment. So it's nothing more than that, and that's exactly what's happening. Regardless of what you perceive or don't perceive or not perceive, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Life doesn't need you to perceive it for it to exist. It doesn't need you alive. It doesn't need any of your opinions, because your opinions are just another interaction happening in the existence. You're just another interaction. If it's happening in this existence, it doesn't need your opinion for it to change or mean anything beyond that objectively. It's existing the way it is in your mind, and thought processes are just another interaction happening in this existence. So back to the main example I was using in describing coping, the indulgences that we experience. That's exactly the point. The indulgences that we experience often create this feedback loop where we indulge in ourselves. Okay, I want to lose. I'm hungry. I eat. I feel fat. Then you start indulging, and then you start getting stressed about something else. And that causes problems. Okay, oh, that's causing. I don't want to gain any more weight. But then you indulge again, and that stresses you out, and that makes you gain weight. Then you decide to lose weight, and that losing weight and causes you stress, and it causes other things to become more stressful, and then that makes you want to eat. But that eating and the fact that you start looking heavy again and you start feeling fat or whatever it may be, creates a deprivation. Then you don't eat, and that creates a deprivation. Then you do eat, and that creates a deprivation or a pain or some kind of dissatisfaction with one's well-being, or some kind of suffering, either be psychological or physical. Which I would argue is just a feedback loop in and of itself, is the description describing our physical interaction and how that is a positive feedback loop as well. My psychology may cause something physically, and the physically causes something to happen psychologically, but the psychological interaction that I think I have, or pain I feel I have, is only a physical interaction happening with my body. Like anxiety, I start feeling my heart rate going up, and that causes some kind of stress, and that makes me think of something. The thinking interacts with my physical bodily processes, and the chemicals and the electric interaction in my neurology, and that causes something to happen to me physically, because my physical body, and like my psychology, my thought processes, and my aura of thought and mind, and interacting with descriptions of reality, and this projection is the same way. It's a physical process happening the same way. It's interacting on the same level as all these other bodily processes. It's only having this projection thing that means something. And this feeling thing, anything can feel, and my brain's allowing every other physical process in my body to feel. Obviously, your brain doesn't have pain receptors. It's the liver and the body are the only things that don't have any kind of physical pain receptors, but it's the thing that's causing the pain in the rest of your body, and that's the source, the root source of the problem that's happening. So that's where the problems are coming and originating from, and it's a feedback loop. So I start feeling sick. It causes me to psychologically think something. I get depressed from a thought, and that causes something to physically happen to me. And it's a feedback loop where things keep getting worse and worse, and you keep indulging and getting worse and deeper into some kind of insanity, psychological depression, despondency, and that can cause these kinds of feedback loops. And especially recognizing reality, that can cause anxiety, which causes heart rate, and it causes you to think of something, then it causes another physical process to happen. It causes adrenaline rushing, some kind of chemical response, something physical is happening, either be in and of itself your brain interaction, or causing some kind of other, something outside of your your central nervous system, and affecting some other part of your body, like your heart system or your heart rate, and having that beat up, and that can cause you to psychologically. It's a feedback mechanism where it's interacting on a different level and sending different signals back and forth to cause some kind of different state of being to the sentient being. And that's how we're indulging and dealing with life. But I think that's all I wanted to say. This wasn't a short video. I keep saying that, but oh well. I guess my short videos aren't great. You can take that with a grain of salt, because you can't have much of an expectation to a certain extent in what I can consider a short video. Anyway, so thank you, and until next time. And I apologize if this isn't the best quality. I'm taping this with webcam, so if the audio is not as good, I'm sorry, but I'm sure you can still hear me, and I apologize if it's not as good as you may want. So thank you, and until next time, bye.